for the world anew.
Welcome to Muffin Talk.
Shines a light to create.
Kia ora and welcome to Muffin Talk. This program is brought to you by the initiative Titipounamu, Study and Joy. I'm pleased to be joined today by Dr. Christopher Longhurst. Chris, a warm welcome and haere mai to our radio program.
Haere mai, Beate. Thank you. Kia ora.
Dr. Christopher Longhurst is a New Zealander from Ahuriri in Hawke's Bay and a lay Catholic theologian who spent many years abroad working in Rome, Italy, and in North Africa. He is a fellow of the International Dialogue Center, CAICID, which brings religious leaders and political decision makers together to develop and implement interfaith and intercultural conflict resolution initiatives. He is also the author of Pictorial Art for Interreligious Dialogue and his new book, Aesthetic Soul, which has been commissioned by CAICID, is in the process of being published. Chris, can you tell us about pictorial art? What is pictorial art? Pictorial art for interreligious dialogue, but first of all, what is pictorial art?
Pictorial art is any art that uses painting as the means of communication through beauty. Pictorial art is a technical term for paintings, for abstract, decorative, figural paintings, the ordinary paintings that you would see in an art gallery hanging on a wall, on a canvas, or between a frame. Pictorial art. It's a picture, an artistic work, a picture.
So a picture could be a pattern, or it can be something that you can recognize a human being. That's all the same. It's all pictorial art.
Indeed. And there are different kinds or genres of pictorial art, but they can be abstract, figurative, representational, non-representational, but modern art, Renaissance art, anything that's painted on a canvas or in a frame would be pictorial art, referred to as a painting.
So when you say pictorial art for interreligious dialogue, does that mean that you are looking at different religions and their art form, or is that how art is implemented is depicting a scene or a thought or a movement? Can you tell us more about it?
Sure. It's actually using art as a medium for the dialogue. So the artwork becomes a conversational piece, as if it were a player in the dialogue, almost like a third party of the dialogue. So it has really nothing to do with the subject matter of the artwork per se, but that becomes an opportunity for dialogue. So the communication through the artwork is visual. So it's what the artwork is saying through the form, the subject matter, the content that's speaking to the dialogue partners as they're looking at the work to create dialogue around a piece of art. Sometimes interreligious dialogue or intercultural dialogue can be quite formulaic or quite formal. So when it's done around a work of art, it becomes more pleasurable and educational as well, and it kind of breaks down those boundaries of the strictness of interreligious dialogue or the theological depth that's around interreligious dialogue. Instead, it becomes the content or the subject matter of the artwork.
When you have different religions, you have different prescriptions also, like when you think of, you gave a talk for Titipounamu Study and Joy about beauty in Islam, and you showed us a lot of different patterns and beautiful designs, but no human beings. Is that something that needs to be considered?
Well, it can be, but that would be simply accidental to the artwork's content, because if you take a subject matter of an artwork and then you have people from different faith traditions around it, they're all looking at the same subject matter. So that subject matter would be the medium or the common denominator for the dialogue. So it's not so much about the faith content, but it's the understanding of whatever the subject matter is of the artwork that becomes the medium for the discussion that leads to dialogue. That's why the artwork is used. So it doesn't matter what kind of artwork is being used, and it doesn't matter what the subject matter is. And the reason why this is very important as a source for interreligious dialogue, and also as a theological source or a source to do theology, as in the book Aesthetic Soul, is because In my view, it raises what is believed to faith content, which is common among diverse religions. For example, what I'm trying to say is that if you have a topic like death, or a major topic that's important to us, like getting old and dying, or love, or the concept of the beauty of creation. An artwork that could inform that subject matter would be the medium for which people of a diverse religion would come together to discuss that topic. So it's more a topics-centered discussion around the artwork, because remember, the artwork doesn't change what it's saying. It's kind of speaking a fixed message, but the way we interpret it can change. But the artwork just says what it's saying through its visual content, through its visual subject matter. Therefore, the discussion opens up around that sense of permanence and stability, rather than the fluidity of theological concepts. It's simply that almost permanence of the artwork becoming the source from which the dialogue opens up.
I find this fascinating because also when I used to do these interfaith calendars, and I would choose a theme like water or fire, and you just had that theme, and all religions have something about these five elements. Of course, the classic elements from the Greek, according to the Greek traditions, but everybody has them, and they all connected with something spiritual. And it's fascinating because you have water, but what people come up with is quite different.
These concepts transcend religions in the sense that they're part of all religions, but they're topics that come into play with different meanings through cultures and religions. So that's the beauty of the artwork's content or subject matter that speaks to that idea. Even simple things as an elderly woman holding oranges. Something like that becomes interpretable of the meaning of the oranges, the meaning of the woman, and things like that, which just opens up the discussion around the people who are viewing the artwork from diverse cultures or religions.
I think that what you're saying is in a very diverse society will be even more important. When I think of, you mentioned death and getting old, there could be in a hospital, they have hospital chapels or religious places that are now more or less, in many places they are neutral. They try to be neutral, so a sacred space for many different religions. So I think that people want to have art because art is definitely can be very soothing, can be very helpful for, especially when somebody's grieving or having problems. So I could imagine that this way of seeing art as connecting the religions is especially important when it comes to people who are sick.
Indeed, and also remember, artwork has a fundamentally enjoyable aspect to it. Most people argue, even if it's not the taste of a specific person, viewing an artwork often bypasses the cerebral passage where you think, and it impacts the limbus immediately. Therefore, you have an emotional impact there too. And it wouldn't be really fair to question anyone's emotional response. So when that happens through a work of art, it creates empathy and it creates a relationship and connection between people too. Therefore, you don't ignore, but you bypass some of that more deeper theological discussion or those things that divide us, because all of a sudden we're connecting through our emotions, through our empathy, through what art basically does, the power of art, the emotional impact of art.
And Chris, tell me, your first book was Pictorial Art in Interreligious Dialogue, and your second one that is currently being being produced is about aesthetic soul. It's also in Interreligious Dialogue. Is that right?
Indeed, because it's looking at art and pictorial art as a source for theology. So what it does, it takes theology out of the faith-seeking understanding, and it focuses on the seeking understanding through faith content. Therefore, arguably every work of art has a content that would be relevant for theological discussion because it's relevant for life, right? So aesthetic soul is seeking to raise artworks to the same level that, for example, a sacred text would be as a source to go to understand what is believed in a faith tradition. However, because it's art and because of the universal language that art uses, it then crosses religious borders. So therefore, you would have people from one faith tradition and another faith tradition contemplating the same topic through the same artwork, which would be relevant to both of them in different ways that they would bring their learned perceptions to understanding that. And through a dialogue, you begin to understand. So notice the focus is not on believing or faith, but understanding what is believed. So I think this is very important today because when you have theological sources like the Bible that remains rooted in Christianity and in Judaism, or you have the sacred Quran that remains rooted in Islam, then it's difficult to have a discussion between people of different faith traditions regarding the content of that because of the importance of the sacred text for the specific faith tradition. But art that is non-religious doesn't really have that same importance. So therefore, it becomes a more neutral space, a common ground that brings people together to discuss the same topics again. So that's why I think art is, by being art, a valid theological source. But again, it's about theology as the understanding, the intellectual core of religion, prescinding faith in a sense, meaning that you can understand what is believed in a different faith tradition through a conversation around the topic that the artwork is presenting to you.
Chris, we met the other day at an exhibition here in Auckland at Laidlaw College, and there was an exhibition called Campus Narrative Exhibition, A Journey Through the Bible. For those of our listeners who have not heard about the artwork in Laidlaw College, can you describe the type of art that we saw there?
Sure, and it was an extraordinary exhibit, and it used a visual art, but not painting per se, but art through glass. So it was a narrative that drew from different sources to represent its content, both its cultural content, its faith content, its academic content, and its beauty through colors and glass, through drawing from, for example, the local flora and fauna of New Zealand, mixed in with a sequence of themes from the Bible, mixed in with architectural space as well, by which there was an itinerary that began with creation and ended back at creation as a new creation as well, that took you through the Bible interspersed with important themes from Maori culture as well, mixed in with architecture and historical church art and Pacifica and Maori art and designs, kowhai, all mixed up together on an itinerary. So it was, I think, an extraordinary example of dialogue, both interreligious dialogue through the Judeo-Christian lens and intercultural dialogue too, through the meanings of the local indigenous culture of Aotearoa, New Zealand, mixed in with biblical inspiration and themes.
I remember there were a lot of birds, and when Aotearoa New Zealand is a country with lots of birds, but and the glass patterns had birds in it. As you said earlier, you can see it as a bird, or you can see a pattern that shows something that relates to the biblical story.
Indeed.
Which I found really interesting, because if you had no idea of Christianity, you would say, oh, beautiful birds and nice colors. And you would like it as a beautiful piece of art, but you would understand it very differently to somebody who says, oh, that's a story from the Bible.
Well, what I found extraordinary about the exhibit was the invitation to reflect upon what you're looking at to create connections. And of course, that takes time. And I think we were experiencing that too when we see the beauty of the kolfai flower, and then and associated with the resurrection. Therefore, the color of the kolfai, the kolfai faith,
The
the
yellow?
kolfai, the kolfai plant, the yellow with the resurrection. My favorite was probably the ruru, the ruru bird, which is the bird that brings in the night, associated with the agony of Christ in the Garden of Eden. So those important Christian biblical scenes were being directly associated with local birds and local flora as well, which I found fascinating. It made it quite intimate and relevant for the people of Aotearoa, New Zealand.
I thought it was also quite special that the art was not just somewhere hidden, but it was in the middle of everything. You had the walls, some of the walls between the rooms, some dividers were glass dividers, and the art was on the glass. So it was really part of the building.
As well as the patterning into the architraves in the architecture as well, and also how the itinerary took you through the space of the students at the college as well, so that there was that sense of the student being on a journey as well. So it wasn't just about academic, but it was about inspiration through nature, through the beauty of New Zealand's own native bush and birds, mixed in with the inspiration of important biblical stories as well. Even I remember there were the maniples, or the part of the balustrade going up the steps that you would hold on to, that also had patterning carved into it as well. And I liked the itinerary was a circuit rather than a linear itinerary that combined 3 levels of architecture with open floor space. And in the center, which would have been the second level, was the heart of the entire exhibit, which was the sacred space, the chapel as well, which the nature and the architecture and the artwork through the glass all revolved around too. So it was really well done, integrated, a lot of unity and meaning, and bright colors as well. That sense of brightness, of light, that we probably intuitively associate, for example, the whiteness of the bird with the divine light, and the lovely contrast of the green nature, a sign of hope, with the blueness of the human persons that were, in a sense, they were figural, but they were abstract. So anyone could identify with them. They weren't reduced to a specific identity. They were abstracted in the sense that they could have been the identity of any person looking at the figure, to understand through the movement of the mother embracing the child, or the movement of Adam and Eve being expelled from the Garden of Eden, to trap that movement in the glass, the movement of the birds in the sky as well, the opening up and the closing down of the wings. It almost invited the observer into follow through with what you're seeing, not to just stand there and observe it, but to participate in the itinerary, to be part of being called up Mount Sinai as Moses was going up Mount Sinai. That beautiful image, do you remember, with the patterning on the side too, with the desert color up to Mount Sinai, as if you were part of that journey. An extraordinarily well done, integrated exhibition, in my view.
I thought also it was fascinating that it was so colorful, and yet the chapel was really almost monochrome.
Yes, it was tenuous, wasn't it? The lighting in the chapel was tenuous. Yes,
It is like
it was soft.
you come from a jungle with a lot of colors and from the busyness of life, and then you come and it's quiet and it's simple and yet very beautiful.
Well, I think when you think about it, without even having to, more intuitively, when you're in the chapel, you're at peace. Therefore, the ambience around you is not distracting. It's quite simplistic. Whereas the ambience on the itinerary, certainly it wasn't distractive, but it was very busy. It was very engaging. It was very bright. It was very contrasting in certain ways. It made you stop and think. You wanted to come up close and then move back. Things that looked like patterns when you stepped back from it. Oh, that's a fish. And then you come up close and it seems like, it just seems like a pattern, and you wonder what it is. So there was that intrigue of detail, but that stepping back to see the entire image as you move through as well. But of course, you're moving, so that kind of reflects the dynamism of our nature too, the action side of us being on a journey. But then when you, as you said, when you got into that middle space, it was about being rather than doing, just being present in the moment. And it was extremely well done, well thought out, both the lighting, the color, the contrasts, the amalgamation of visual art. Remember, architecture is a form of visual art too, as well as painting. Granted, not painting in this case, but stained glass.
But
really nice symbolism.
That's why it fit all very well together. Even the stairs that, as you said, the handrails were part of the art. Everything was part of this art. It reminded me of art in Europe, but of course it's a very Pacific. The patterns were very much Pacifica. But the way that that's like with sacred spaces in general, they are not just buildings where you have place of worship but most artists and most architects, they consider where the light comes from, when the light comes from. Like if you go to a traditional church, for example, Mass was celebrated in the morning, so the light had to shine in onto that part where the altar is. And you wouldn't put the altar at the corner of a church where it's dark in the morning. So all of these things were considered, and sometimes people take it for granted, or they want to change a church without realizing what the architect really had intended.
I personally believe that within us is an intuitive knowledge of the meaning of things that we see in nature. Granted, we are impacted by our cultures and by our own learning, but I think this might go back to the tabula rasa idea. I'm not sure, but red does have a meaning for many people because we associate life with the color red through blood and through passion and things like that. So when you see the redness in the chalice there, what struck me was you're not looking at a dead corpse on a body anymore. You're looking at the idea of life through the vine being the blood of Christ. Remember that beautiful red chalice that had the gold background in the scene? I think it would have been the resurrection scene. So gold has a sense of fire, a sense of warmth, a sense of light. But there were parts of the exhibit that had the glass intentionally clear, and clarity, of course, has meaning, especially that sense of that apathetic sense of not having anything there, therefore a certain fullness. Or a certain non-materiality. And I like the fact how sometimes the sky was blue and sometimes the sky was white and sometimes the sky was clear. We can pass over that, or we can stop and reflect on that too and understand, well, there's meaning. Human beings were contrasted between red. I noticed some were red and some were blue. And when I saw the blue human beings, that immediately struck me as the spiritual side of our humanity, whereas the red struck me more as the corporeal side of our humanity, mixed up with the beautiful greens of creation.
Yes, and the colors were really important because the birds were not necessarily depicted in the color that they usually look like, or you wouldn't recognize some of the birds because that was not important. There were all kinds of different birds, or New Zealand birds, but sometimes it was hard to recognize them. But what I found great was there was the name of the room that connected to the birds, and where you knew that's the name of the bird, and the rooms were named after the birds. So
yes, and there was the concept of the bird singing and the bird's song too, and the bird was giving life to verses from the sacred text as well, which I found fascinating. And remember, theology has a sub-branch called chromatology, by which you apply theological meanings to colors, and some of those birds then took on theological meanings rather than the meanings of nature as well, to kind of blend that supernatural and natural aspect of the entire exhibition as well, which I thought was fascinating.
And the artist was Samuel, and his name was Pio. And yes.
And Sasha was the lead for the exhibition. So, congratulations to the entire team who put on this exhibition that is inspirational and educational. And as you notice, the people who were going through were engaged in conversations among themselves, and even as individuals were too. That conversation that you have with yourself when you're looking at a work of art as well, as you contemplate its meaning, and you ask questions within yourself too. So that interior dialogue that was taking place as people walked through as well, I thought was quite meaningful.
And it was a young artist. So I just checked, the designer was Pio Mulipola.
Yes.
Yeah, and he was there, which was also great because you could talk to the artist, and I'm sure that he would have enjoyed listening to how people reacted to his art.
Yes. And remember, there was the international sense to it as well, where there were expressions of welcome, greetings that were in different languages,
Yes.
common languages, and also classical languages at the end, which I found, important to engage on an international level too.
And it referred to our church community, so the multicultural within our church community. Because I think with the languages, it said something about the community.
The entire concept of church came very strongly across as the people of God, and noticed how the end of each scene was the beginning of the next scene too. So I recall from scene one with the creation and the fall, and the people of God and the creation of the fall. Then the people of God become the beginning of the next scene that moves into the Exodus and the law, which ends with the kingdom. Then the kingdom becomes the beginning of the scene three, which goes into the gospel narrative as well. So it was really the connections were extraordinary. I think they were profound in their simplicity too. That they were making connections with the ends and the beginnings of each scene, right through to end up where you started. Yes. Which was that creation again. So that sense of creation being renewed. Yeah. And remember, the very beginning, the creation was not actually with the Genesis narrative. It was with John. Mm-hmm. It was the first chapter of John.
Yes.
And it was in Te Reo. So immediately the impact of the Word. And the Word being with God and God being the Word, but that Word being spoken to us through the Indigenous language of New Zealand as well. So really well done. It was a matrix of so many different trajectories, wasn't it? Art, architecture, religion, culture, nature, flora, fauna, all coming together in an architectural space that was inspirational. And the entire exhibit, Beate, is on the internet as well, where you can go through each scene and look at the stained glass windows and understand them through the narrative that's on the internet as well.
Yeah, we can put a link up. Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you for telling us more about pictorial art, about art and religion, and now about the Laidlaw College art, which was wonderful.
Real pleasure, Beate. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Out there, heroic peace is calling. In the bonds of love we meet. For the world a new day dawning, and shines a light to greet. We're singing, this is the day when the hope was calling. This is the day when the light did shine. This is the day when the world can sing. Te rangi Māori. Can you hear the cry for the wounds to be healed? yes, and can you hear